Imagine if it was the end of the world. You got a huge supply of flour stored up, but you don't know what to do with it. I'm going to show you how you can make your own bread if it's the end of the world with just very little ingredients. It's basically all you need. And here we go.
We're going to talk about...
My dad's the expert here, so he's going to actually make it.
We're going to talk about, it's the end of the world, you've stockpiled bags and bags and bags of flour like you're supposed to, but now the world's ended, how do you eat the flour? You don't just scoop your hand in there and eat it. What are you going to do? I'm going to show you how you do this with very minimal resources. And we're going to tell you, even if you had even less than this, what would you do? First thing is, you got a pan, you have to have something to cook it in. We're assuming you have an oven right now. If you don't have an oven, you can't make bread, but you can make pasta. That's the next video. For now, we're assuming you got an oven. We're going to make bread. Got a pan to cook it in the oven. We're going to put a little bit of oil on the bottom so the bread doesn't stick to the pan. If you don't have this, it'll still work, but the bread might stick a little bit, and you'll just have to scrape it off a bit, and it might get a little burnt. But it'll still work. If you've got the cooking oil, any kind is fine. That'd be a little bit better. I'm using olive oil here, but you can use any kind of oil. Whole point is just to keep it from sticking to the bottom of the pan.
Yep, once the end of the world happens, you gotta be ready here.
Now, you got your flour. What are you going to do with it? TJS and I, we put in 2 cups of flour, and that makes us about enough for a side dish on one meal. 1 cup of white, and I'm going to use 1 cup of whole wheat. Whole wheat flour is considered healthier than white flour. It's less processed, you don't do as much to make it, but it's got a few drawbacks. One is it doesn't cook real well. The bread doesn't rise up real well, and it doesn't taste as good, and I think those are the 2 basic problems. One is it doesn't make real tall bread, it doesn't grow up real big, and it doesn't taste as good. Oh, it's also a little harder to digest. It's a little better for you though. So if you're not worried at all about being healthy, just put in all white flour. If you want to try and take care of your health a little bit more, depending on how long you think civilization will keep going, you can put in half whole wheat, half white. You could do it all whole wheat, but it's got some problems. It's not so easy to do, and it's a little harder to digest. So this is 50% whole wheat, 50% white. The amount isn't that particular. I'm not a measuring kind of cook. I'm a spill it in there till you get it to work kind of cook. So we got 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of whole wheat, 1 cup of white. This will be making a meal for both of us. Next thing you got to add in is yeast. But like I said, if you don't have any whole wheat, just use all white. That'll work just fine. Actually, it tastes better and it'll cook better, but it's not quite as good for you. If civilization's coming to an end, maybe you don't care.
You might have to stockpile a lot to get all this working every day if you wanted to feed yourself every day, right?
Yep. Need lots of flour. So 2 cups of flour per meal per day. That's not even our whole meal. So it takes a lot of food to survive. So stockpile up real well. Next, if you want bread, it's a good idea to have yeast. Yeast needs refrigeration. If you don't have yeast, this will work just fine, but what you'll get is real flat bread. It won't rise, it won't be fluffy, it'll be dense, harder to chew. It'll give you the same number of calories, it won't taste as good, but it'll work fine. So if you don't have the yeast, you just leave it out and you don't worry about it. But if you got the yeast, it makes much better bread. So we'll put in 2 tablespoons of yeast here with our 2 cups, not tablespoon, whatever this is. Teaspoon, I think.
Yeah, 1 teaspoon.
2 teaspoons of yeast with 2 cups of flour. And you keep the yeast in the refrigerator when you're not using it. All the ingredients are now ready. We got the pan oiled, we got the yeast and the flour in the pan. All we need left is water. What you do next is you put some water, and you want it warmish to hot, somewhere in there. A lot of this stuff, it doesn't really matter what you do. You can make a lot of mistakes.
It still comes out pretty well, yeah.
It's really hard to ruin bread, actually. It's always good. It doesn't matter. You get the wrong number of ingredients, you get the wrong temperature of the water, wrong amount, you don't have yeast, you don't oil it. It just doesn't, it's always good. So it's like pizza. In fact, bread and pizza are very similar. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to like it. First thing you do, mix all the flour and the yeast together. I got two kinds of flour here. Like I said, if you don't like the whole wheat, just use all white. Mix the yeast in there. Also, what I say, you don't have the yeast, leave it out. It's just not going to be as light and fluffy. It's going to be denser. But it'll still be edible and reasonably good. Now you start mixing in water. And this is the tricky part. You mix in water until the bread's the right consistency. This is why you don't have to measure it too well. You slowly put in the water, mix it up with your hands until it's like a big blob that you can spread out in the baking pan. So I'm going to pour in a bunch of water here, and I'm going to start moving it around. This is messy stuff, but it works just fine. So now you just keep mixing it together. Mix it with your fingers up, and what it'll do is it'll stay dry until the right amount of water hits, and then it'll start to moisten. You put in too much water, it gets all sticky, and you can't work with it anymore. It's just too sticky. But if you put in too little, it's too powdery. So what you want to do is just gradually add little by little bit more until it's got enough water to hold it together, but no more. And the only danger is you put in too much water, and then you have to add in more flour. So you might want to have the flour handy if you put in too much water. Otherwise, just add in a little bit at a time until you get it just about into a nice ball that looks like something you could cook and eat. You're not supposed to eat this raw. I'm not sure why, but the bag recommends you don't. So I think you have to cook it.
Maybe it's not healthy or something, I guess, or the ingredients.
I think they're probably worried about bacteria, is what I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, you got to cook it to get the bacteria out.
Put it in an oven. It'll kill it, all the bacteria. Now, if you don't have the oven, if this video is popular, we're going to make another video showing you how to make bread without an oven, which is basically pasta. So you can do this. That's not as tasty, but like without the yeast, you'll survive. And if survival's what you want, because civilization ended, you can do it.
It could end too, because the pandemic and everything.
It came really close there.
We ran out of
dead
water
in the streets.
one time.
Yeah, we sure did. So now you can see here, I'm getting something that looks a little bit more like a pile of dough. That's something you might want to eat. And you always waste a little bit and never get it all in there, but you do.
Oh yeah, some of it gets left at the bottom,
Yeah,
I guess.
it's never perfect. Perhaps there is a better way to do this, but those people aren't making a video right now for you, so you're going to have to watch this.
Yeah, we're the only ones showing you how to do this.
Yeah, we've tried to research this, and we found out there's a little bit of a lack here in the Doomsday prepper survivalist type world. You got plenty of moms baking stuff with sugar and spices and cookies and things like that, but you don't have a lot of stuff on how a Doomsday prepper should prepare his own food. You can't just open cans all day. You can't eat all cans. You need some cans, but a person needs something more solid. You need a starch. Maybe you run out of cans too, but this is starting to look pretty good to me. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off some of this stuff off my hands. Again, we're wasting a little bit, but flour's pretty cheap. Although if you have to stockpile it, well, maybe every ounce is valuable to you as you start starving. But for us, that big bag of flour costs about $3, I think. I can't remember.
Yep. Yeah, you can stockpile a lot of these easily.
Yeah, it's a lot. Not easily, but it's a lot to carry around. And
does it go bad after stockpiling it a while or not?
It's got a date on the package. I don't think it would actually expire unless you got like mold or bugs in there. It's probably good for longer than it says. We got our own stockpile we can show you there. That's what we're currently using.
Oh yeah.
And then when the end of the world comes, we're ready, because you see, there's 2 more. Look at that.
Oh.
Look at that. We're ready. So, bring on Armageddon. We're going to be fine.
Yeah. And for those of you who are really serious, you can fill up a whole room of these too.
And now you can see here we're they call this kneading, I think. You're just kind of moving it around till it's about the right consistency. That is, it's got not too much water, not too little. But like we said before, you can really go quite a bit wrong and it's still okay. If it's too sticky, it'll just be hard to work with. It'll stick to your hands, it'll stick to the pan, but it'll cook just fine and eat just fine. Too dry, yeah, it might be a little powdery, but again, you'll eat it just fine. So as long as you can shape it into a ball that you can flatten into a piece of bread, you're going to be perfectly happy with it. And the more you do this, the better at it you'll get. I got to where I can make a loaf of bread like this in a day with just 10 or 15 minutes of work like this. And then we'll talk about what happens next, but the rest of it's just kind of waiting around. You don't do a lot of work, aside from washing the pots and pans, which take a little bit of effort. So we got it into a ball here, and I'm going to kind of flatten it to the shape I want. Flatter cooks easier, so you might want to make it nice and flat, but if you want a big fluffy piece of bread, maybe you want it thicker, you just cook it longer in the oven. Like the cooking is like everything else. You can't really mess it up. You cook too little or too much, it doesn't matter. It's really pretty easy to do, aside from this mixing business, but you just gradually add the water till you got something you like the look of. If you mess it up, start over, put in another one. There's a nice flat piece of bread. Looking a little like a mini pizza or something. Flatten as much as you're able to and still fit it in the pan. Then what you do, you put it in the pan, cover it up, and you leave it to rise. Rise time can be anywhere from, well, you don't have to let it rise at all if you don't want to. 15 minutes or so is kind of the minimum. But we usually let it go while we exercise, maybe like an hour, hour and a half, something like that. Doesn't really matter too much. Just don't let it go so long it gets moldy, I guess, or dries out. But you let it rise there, and next we'll show you, we're going to wait a little bit, and we're going to come back and cook it, and then we're going to eat it.
Yep. All right, so we'll see you back when our exercise is over and when the bread's rised.
Hello again, we're back. It was a little longer than we thought. Like I said earlier, it's usually between 15 minutes and an hour and a half. We had a mammoth 2-hour basketball session because the temperature rose up to a very sweaty 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really hot out there, so of course we were out at 2 hours. And while that happened, our bread rose very nicely. You can see it's nice and thick now. I don't know how much perspective you get on that, but it's nice and thick.
Let's see how close can we get.
It starts off a little kind of flat and grows up bigger. It'll get even bigger in the oven here. So we're going to put it in the oven here, and much like everything else, it doesn't really matter how long you bake it. What you want to do is you want it to turn kind of a brownish and have kind of a harder crust. You can cook it as much or as little as you want. What I do is I set the oven to 400 degrees, and I cook it at that. I haven't preheated it though. I just turn it on, and I set the timer for about 15 minutes. And then when that timer goes off, I turn off the oven and just let it sit there with the oven off for another 5 minutes or so. So about 20 minutes total, and I don't preheat the oven, and I just let it go up and then go down. That saves electricity and time. You have to preheat. So we'll come back and show you what it tastes like.
All right.
The bread is done here. You can see it's risen a little bit more, and it's done when it turns kind of a brownish color, and you're really looking for it to be, you tap it like that, and it's kind of firm. And this is the bread here. We cut it up and eat it next.
Yep, that's what it looks like.
Yum.
Wait, is it hot?
It's been cooling a little bit already, so it'll be hot when it comes out of the oven. You got to let it cool off before you cut it up.
Yeah.
Unless you're really hungry, then you just eat it hot. But don't burn yourself. Be careful.
Yep, we'll see what it's like. All right, so we got the bread finished, and now here it is. This is what it looks like.
Final product.
Yep.
Yummy.
We
Look at
carved out
that.
part of it.
That's what your bread looks like.
Some of it right there. We
That's
carved
for the
out.
other eater.
Yeah.
That's TJS's.
I'll show you
All
what
right.
it's like. Oh, yuck!
Oh no! Oh!
Just kidding.
Oh, you gave me a heart attack there.
No,
Delicious stuff,
good.
folks.
It's
Just
good.
kidding. Best bread you ever have. Nice and fresh.
Yeah, this is especially good. If you're in like the end of the world situation, you'll still be fine because this bread tastes good.
Civilization could collapse, and there you will be eating your bread, snug and smug.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.